Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am a lot behind on videos. I was sick for pretty much all of June and a little bit of May, so I haven't filmed my wrap-ups for either May or June. So today we're going to go through the 34 books that I read in both of those months, and I'm going to go through them in the order that I read them and tell you my thoughts and ratings on them. I started the month of May on a pretty high note. This is One Last Shot, and it's a second chance romance set in Italy. It's about this model who gets booked on the photo shoot of the guy that she used to date. They had like a pact to get like married if they weren't with anybody at the time, and it just went off. So she goes and books the shoot, and they reunite in Italy, and it is so cute. I gave this one 4 stars. This book does lean on the miscommunication trope pretty heavily, which is the only downside of it. I also read the Arc of Crossroads by Devney Perry. This one came out in June. I just don't have a physical copy of this one yet, but I really love this one. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This is a small town romance. This is also second chance, and it's fantastic. Next up, I read The Chamber by Will Dean. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This isn't my favorite of his books. He's one of my favorite thriller authors, though. This is about a group of people who get stuck in like a hyperbaric chamber. They're on a dive, and somebody dies, and there's only a few of them in this chamber, so they know that somebody might have potentially killed that person, and so it's a mystery of trying to figure out who it is while they're able to just slowly come up to the surface because they can't go up all at once. And it's a very claustrophobic book. They're in very close quarters, and I enjoyed this one, but the character development wasn't my favorite, and there was a lot of slow parts in this one, so that's why I got 3.5 stars. And then I loved Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is my first book of hers, and it is my favorite. I read 3 of her books in just the month of May because I really loved them so much. I gave this one 4.25 stars. I do not like the pregnancy trope in romance books most of the time, but this one was done so incredibly well, and I love this. I ate this entire book up in the disability rep, and this was amazing. Next up, I read The Resort by Sarah Och, I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name, but I like this one. I gave this one 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. It was decent. I'm happy I read it, but I definitely probably wouldn't reread this one, and it's not my favorite of the whole month, but it was okay. Then I read Falling for Gage. I gave this one 4.75 stars. I love Mia Sheridan, and this one is so spectacular. If you have read Archer's Voice, you have to read this one. It's so good. It's set in the same small town. It has those characters like Archer and Travis that you meet in the other books. They're side characters in this book, and it is so good. This is a small town romance, and if you read any of the romances in this pile, there's actually a few that you have to read, but this one's definitely one of them. It's amazing. Next up, I read the other 2 Hannah Bonham Young books that aren't the Christmas book. It's Next to You and then Next of Kin. I believe I read this one first and gave this one 3.75 stars, and then I read Next to You and gave this one 4 stars. These ones are both amazing as well. I just didn't love them quite as much as Out on a Limb, but they are really good. Next of Kin is like forced proximity. It's about these 2 people who are trying to become like the caretakers of their siblings, and they end up living together to like make ends meet because they have to prove that they have enough income. So they live together. It was supposed to be temporarily, and they end up falling for each other. And then Next to You is like a friends to lovers. She like on a whim buys this bus and has no idea how to like actually make it function. She wants to like go on trips in it, and so she has her friend help her, and they are of course going to fall for each other. Tourist Season I really enjoyed. This is very reminiscent of like Ellen Hilderbrand's writing, which I found to be amazing. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's very much like a drama-filled beachy romance book, so if that's up your alley, then definitely recommend this one. And then one of my 5-star reads of the months, I have 4 total, is Just for the Summer. This is so incredibly good. You have to read this. This might be my favorite Abby Jimenez, but I don't know, yours truly might still be in the lead, but they're both 5-star reads to me. It's so good, and it's just a must-read if you like romance. Then I read The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher, and this one was okay. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I definitely was entertained, and I didn't want to put this book down. It takes some crazy turns that I definitely wouldn't have seen coming, and overall, I did enjoy this one. I'll definitely read more from this author. This was my first book of hers, so I definitely plan to read more. And then I read She's Not Sorry by Mary Kubica, and this one was crazy. The twist that takes place like halfway through this book had my jaw on the floor. I haven't had a thriller twist like that take me by surprise that much in a long time, and I really enjoyed this one. This one's about this nurse who normally tries to keep her like personal life separate from her work life, but they have this person who came in that at first glance seems to be a suicide attempt, but after looking into it more, she starts to think that there might have been more to it and somebody might have done this to her, and so she's trying to uncover what happened, and seriously, the twists in this are wild. This one was 4.75 stars, by the way. Next up, we have Very Bad Company, and I enjoyed this one. This is very much like a workplace drama. It's like a rich person behaving badly, a very wealthy company, something bad happens, someone goes missing, and they're trying to figure out what took place, and you don't really like any of the characters because they're all pretty bad people, but it's enjoyable. I gave this one 3.5 stars. And then this was kind of a flop for me. This is Suicide Med by Freida McFadden. And a little bit into this book, I thought it was going to be like a 5-star read. I was loving this book. And then it just got like weirder and weirder. Some of the stuff that takes place in this book is so bizarre. And then you're also hearing the same like chunk of time from at least 5 different people's perspectives. And so you keep going back to the same like time and seeing it through someone else's eyes. And I got sick of that too. After like 3 of them, I was done. I was like, I don't want to go back and relive the same exact set of time in someone else's eyes, but you just keep having to do it. And I don't know, it was 3.25 stars. I didn't hate it because I did think it started out pretty strong, but the direction it took was very bizarre. And then the second 5-star read out of these 2 months was Keep You by Christopher M. Tantillo, and I loved this one. If you like YA, you have to read this. This is a YA like dark mystery. It also has some elements of romance as well. And the twist at the end of this, I don't know if it's like a twist, but I guess more of a reveal, also had my jaw on the floor. It was devastating. I thought of this book for a long time. I need the sequel immediately because this was so good. And then I arc read The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. This one comes out on the 16th of July, and this was really good. I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't as good as The Wishing Game in my opinion, but it was still really fun. It's a very whimsical story that kind of takes inspiration from the Chronicles of Narnia. It's not like a retelling in any way, so don't think that, but it has a lot of really amazing elements to it. I enjoyed this a lot, and it is a queer like love story in it too, which was so good. The only reason this didn't get higher for me is because it took me a long time to get into this book. I'd say the first like 40% of this, I was struggling to get invested, but once I got invested, I loved it. So you can't give up on this book if you start reading it. Just know it's going to take a little bit to get into. And then I read The Trail of Lost Hearts, which was interesting. I gave this one 3.5 stars, but I started out loving this book. The first half was so spectacular, and then something happens that I'm not going to spoil, but something happens like halfway through that just took the entire book in a different direction, and I did not love it after that point. So I didn't really know what to rate this because the first half was like really good. The second half was pretty bad in my opinion, so 3.5 stars. And then another one of my 5-star reads was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I love her books. I have never seen any of her twists coming. I am always so invested in them and can't put them down, and this was no exception. This is definitely one of my favorites of hers. If not, maybe my second favorite. The Woman in Cabin 10 will probably never be dethroned from its first place just because that's the book that got me into reading, but I can't wait to reread this one. I already want to, even though I don't normally reread thrillers very often because you already know the twists, but this one, absolutely spectacular. It takes place on like a reality dating show that's on a remote island, and there's a storm that traps them all there, and they have no contact with the outside world, and people start dying, so they know that one of them is killing people, and it is so good. Piglet was a very unique and interesting and pretty bizarre book. I did like this one. It had some like leftover questions for me that didn't get answered though, which I didn't love, so I gave this one 3.5 stars. Overall, it was pretty solid. And then I gave 4 stars to The Truth About Melody Brown. Looking back, I barely remember anything that happened in this book, but I do remember enjoying it at the time, so it was pretty solid, I guess. This one is a thriller, and all I remember is that it's about this woman who kind of like doesn't have full memory of what happened in her past, so it's her like uncovering that. But yeah, I did read it. I barely remember that I read it. And then another one of my 5-star reads, I think this is the last of the 4 of them, is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I adored this book. This is so spectacular. I ate every single second of this up, and Emily Henry can do no wrong. This is definitely one of my favorites of hers. I love that most of her books are set in Michigan. I love the banter between the characters. If you like romance, this is another one that you absolutely have to read. The Hospital left a little something to be desired in my opinion. I gave this one 3.25 stars. The premise is interesting. It's about this woman who wakes up after having a very traumatic incident, and she doesn't remember what happened, and her memory of her past doesn't seem to align with the reality that she's being told by people who are visiting her, and she starts to think that somebody might have done this to her to put her in the hospital, and she's trying to figure out who it is and if she can trust the people around her. And it sounds so good, and it was decent. I just wasn't super invested. There was something missing in this book, and I could never put my finger on it. The next one that I read was Breakaway by Grace Riley, and I liked this one. I believe I gave this one 3.5 stars. I didn't quite like it as much as First Down, which is the first book in the series, but I did enjoy it. It's a pretty good hockey romance. And then Hookline and Sinker, there's 2 books in this. I'll get them both out right now, actually, as well as Home is Where the Bodies Are. I hadn't written down my ratings at the time, and then I went to write them down. It's been about 3 weeks at this point, and both of these books, I had to read the back to actually figure out if I had read them. I have them in the pile of books I've read, and I could not remember at all reading these until I looked at the back of both, and now I do remember, but they were very forgettable, so I gave them both 3 stars. I remember enjoying both of these at the time of reading them, but kind of like the Lisa Jewell book, I afterwards, a few weeks later, they're barely in my mind, which doesn't happen to me with books a lot of the time. Most of the time I do remember the plot, at least to like some degree, but these ones I really barely remember at all. Next up I read If Something Happens to Me, which is a really wild thriller. I gave this one 4.25 stars. It's pretty unrealistic at times, but it's also just really fun, and I was very invested, and the twists were, although sometimes ridiculous, just kept me on my toes. So I do recommend this one. And then I read Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. This one's the second book after Binding 13, and I really like this book. The books are really long, like honestly in my opinion too long. This one's like 650 pages and the font is tiny, so like it takes a long time to read through these. And I like them though. They're YA, like I'd say slice of life books. There's not a whole lot of plot happening, but this one definitely had more than the first book because you already know the characters, so it kind of jumps right in. And I did enjoy this one. I gave this one 4 stars, and the first book I gave I think 3.5 stars or 3.75 stars. So I overall definitely will keep continuing the series. I am enjoying it. And then I gave 4.5 stars to Local Woman Missing. I love this book. I did see the twist coming of who it was going to be. I did not know the reasoning behind it, but I figured it out because it follows a formula that a lot of thriller books do follow. But overall, this was really fun, really wild. Definitely enjoyed it and definitely recommend it. The Summer Girl by Al Kennedy is the 3rd book in the Avalon Bay series, and I think this one was my favorite of the series. I give this one 4 stars. Looking back, I'm wondering why I didn't give it a little bit higher, because I did really like this one, so I might have to readjust because this one was really good. I definitely recommend this whole series. It's not my favorite series of hers, but it is really good. And then I don't rate memoirs, but I loved Homebody. This is a graphic novel memoir, and it's about Theo Parrish, who is non-binary, and it's kind of just their life story and their story of discovering themselves, and it was just very inspiring and very moving, and I've thought about this book so many times since. If you have ever struggled with your own identity, then this is just a very heartwarming story and will just make you feel very affirmed, and I love this. And Not So Meet Cute was surprising to me. It wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, but I gave it 4.25 stars. I'm excited to keep going on the series. This is my second of her books and definitely my favorite of the 2. I also read Truly Madly Deeply, which was pretty good. I gave it 3.5 stars. There were some aspects to it that I didn't love, but overall I did enjoy the 2 characters, and this does have a main character that's an author, so it's kind of like a book about books, so it was kind of cute. And then I also read Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey, and this was so much fun. I did not expect to like a golf romance as much as I did because I hate golf, but this was amazing. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's very much just like a kind of lighthearted summer romance. Not a ton of plot happening in this, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to read the second book because I think that one comes out in just a week or 2. And then lastly, I read The Right Move. This one, actually, I lied earlier. This one's the last 5-star read. This was so good. I gave this one 5 stars and ate this entire book up. I love this. I also gave the first book in the series 5 stars, but this one was so much better in my opinion. I'm really excited to read the 3rd book, which is already out, and then the 4th book, which I think comes out in either July or August, so I can't wait. Her writing is spectacular. This is also a sports romance. This one's a basketball romance. The first book was a hockey romance. I don't know what the next book is, but I'm just obsessed, so definitely recommend this too. And that's all of them. It was a pretty solid couple of months. I didn't read as much as I normally would, especially in June because I was so sick that I really wasn't reading at all. And I'm also like very deep in the wedding planning process, so that's taking up a lot of my time too. But July, so far, I'm recording this just a couple of days into July, and so far I've been reading a lot more already. So I'm excited to see what I read in July, and I'd love to hear what your favorite book was that you read in June or May because I'm always looking for more recs.